Good morning, conference goers. If you are a member of the robotics and controls area of research, then you know that summer is the most exciting time of the year for research conferences to take place. So if you're like me and you are headed in just a few days to go to the ICRA conference this year at Georgia Tech, you might be starting to think about packing for your conference trip. So having been in the research area for quite some time, I started back in, when was it? I think about 2017. I finished high school and was doing undergraduate research between my high school senior year and my first year at Clemson. Shortly after that, I got to go to my first ever research conference. And man, conferences are quite the experience. They're really fun because you get to learn a lot about all of the cutting edge research that's going on in your area, but man, are they tiring. They're pretty grueling. Usually they involve going to lots and lots and lots of research talks. Sometimes it involves walking around a lot in some pretty uncomfortable shoes. I don't know why, but that's the part that stands out to me as being one of the big bummers. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So I've actually had several of our own graduate students here at FAMU FSU ask me for some conference tips recently. So I wanted to kind of share my conference tips with everybody who might be going to your first conference, or maybe you have been going for years and years, and maybe there's still an interesting tidbit that I have to share with you. So here we go. Usually what students ask me about is networking at conferences, and I get that because as a student, you are kind of new to the area, but you want to start building your network. You want to start meeting people who are big names in your field, but you don't want to come off too strong, right? You don't want it to be awkward. You don't want to kind of foist yourself on people with your elevator pitch because it can just be a little weird. So, as someone who is definitely an introvert, I was really overwhelmed with the idea of starting to network in my own field. And I started out in the orthopedics field, so I started out going to the Orthopedic Research Society's annual meetings. But when I switched to graduate school, I started to going to the bigger robotics conferences like ICRA. Uh, and so I'm going to share with you what I did. And I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I will say that one of the people that I was most excited to meet and most excited to hopefully get to know better over the years, um, I have now written a paper with that individual, and we are actually currently putting together a grant proposal together. So in my mind, that means that my strategy was successful, at least for my own networking goals. So here's what I did. I basically didn't network, which sounds terrible. And that's not entirely true. So what I did is I relied pretty heavily on my mentors who knew the right people to be talking to. So um, my PhD advisor, Jim Schmiedler, introduced me to people when I was at conferences. He basically put the ball in my court and said, "Hey, if there's anyone that you think you'd like to meet, let me know and I can introduce you." But then, of course, sometimes he took the initiative and was like, "Hey, I think you should meet this person. I'm gonna go say hi. Let me introduce you." And so it was as simple as that. It legitimately was just an introduction. He would start catching up with one of his buddies in the research field, and then at the same time say, "Hey, I don't know if you've met my PhD student yet. This is Taylor Higgins. She's working in this area." And then they'd get right back to talking and catching up. And I did not think of that as networking at first, but it was actually the most natural way to start forming a relationship. So I did not, at that point, talk to them in depth about my research or anything. I actually pretty much left it at that for my first couple of conferences. What I did do that I think worked well for me is that every time I would see that individual at a conference thereafter, so you end up being on kind of the same conference circuit with some of the same people over and over. So what I would do is I would just reintroduce myself. I'd say, "Hey, I'm Taylor Higgins. I'm a PhD student of Jim Schmiedler and Pat Winsing." And they would say, "Oh yeah, we met at the NRI meeting last year." And I was like, "Yeah, that's right. It's great to see you. Hope you're doing well." And again, I kind of left it at that. And sometimes that led to catching up on research, and sometimes we just said hello. So after enough times, they remembered my name, which was great. And then over time, we just started catching up more and more and having more in-depth conversations. And I felt that that method of networking was right for me. At no point did it feel super awkward or that I was like begging for their time so that I could give them an elevator pitch. So that worked well for me. And like I said, Marcy O'Malley, if you're listening, that was my strategy with you. And so now I've worked with Marcy on a couple of projects. So maybe that will work for you. So that's really all I have to say about networking is if you are an introvert and the idea of networking seems really overwhelming to you, just keep in mind that it doesn't have to be. It can be supernatural. Not supernatural like ghosts. It can be natural in that these things grow over time. You don't need to become best buddies in one day. They don't need to go home from the first conference that they've seen you at and remember your name. It's really just being there and reintroducing yourself every time you see them. Okay, so actually most of the tips that I have are not related to networking. They're about surviving the grueling, usually week-long conference. So my number one tip is, and I wish I were supported by this brand. I'm not, I should be though. My number one tip is Band-Aid Tough Strips. These beautiful products were introduced to me at my very first research conference in New Orleans by a researcher named Sarah Helms, who actually we go way back. Apparently we have family members in common, but Sarah Helms, thank you so much for introducing me to Band-Aid Tough Strips. So Band-Aid Tough Strips are slightly more expensive than normal Band-Aids. They have to be the tough strips because they have this super duper adhesive and this really strong fabric. And the reason that you need Band-Aid tough strips is because, especially if you're a girl, you're probably going to buy some new shoes and find out that they are awful for your feet while you're at this conference. And if they're not, even if they're not new, what I found is that you end up walking so much at these conferences that even shoes that you thought were super comfortable will eventually give you blisters. I get them really, really badly on the backs of my heels to the point where like they're bloody and disgusting. So what you do is you take one of these Band-Aids. If you are already feeling a pressure point on your shoe or like on your heel, usually it's red and you can see it and you can put the Band-Aid right over the spot that's red. Or if you are trying to be preventative, like I've learned to do, then I just put on the shoe and kind of see where along my line the edge of the shoe is. And then I put the Band-Aid so that the Band-Aid catches the edge or the lip of the shoe. And so that the lip of the shoe ends up rubbing on the Band-Aid and not rubbing on your foot all day. So these are a lifesaver. I got the big box. Like I said, they're kind of expensive. I think these were like $15 for the big box, but I will stash these everywhere because I use them all conference long. I put new ones on in the morning. Sometimes they fall off midday, even though they're super sticky. So I keep extras in my book bag, and they are a lifesaver. Lifesaver. There's nothing worse than sitting in a long conference room with your heels bleeding all day. It sucks. Okay, what's next? Along the lines of shoes. So um, this is kind of gross. I don't know if you're if you're similar to me, but if you're walking around in dress shoes all day, especially if they're more like enclosed, like flats or like Sperry's, they can get a little stinky over time. So what I found is that you can use a little tiny travel can of Lysol. If you treat your shoes every night with the Lysol, make it nice and wet, it'll dry overnight. It kind of kills some of that bacteria and can help your shoes not to get really stinky by the end of the week, which is really gross, but it happens. That's life with human feet. Okay, so let's see, related note of stinky things. I get kind of overwhelmed in hotel rooms when everything gets really disorganized. And so one thing that I found that I really like to do is to bring a laundry bag. This is just from the dollar store. It's a mesh laundry bag, like I said, like $1, but it helps me to keep my dirty clothes separate from my clean clothes and up off the floor and kind of organized so they're not just like all over the place, which is especially important when you're sharing a hotel room. I know students a lot of times share hotel rooms, so keeping organized can be really nice. Especially if you're sharing a space. Laundry bag. So like I said, I got that at the dollar store, and I actually love the dollar store for travel items. So while I'm at the dollar store, I go ahead and stock up on like all of my other travel stuff. They have this nice like toothbrush toothpaste combo, which is much cheaper than it would be at like a pharmacy, you're flossing, shaving, whatever needs that you have. Um, I do try to kind of pamper myself a little bit while I'm at conferences. So I try to get the nice disposable razor because uh you're kind of on point at a conference, right? You want to be looking your best. You want to look professional. You want to show the best side of yourself, show that you're put together and ready to communicate in a really professional way. And so a part of that process for me is being confident in how I look. And so I want to make sure that I've got everything with me to make me feel like I'm ready to start the day every day at that conference. So what I also bring is my makeup bag. This is actually kind of like my go everywhere bag. I take it with me even in my book bag, not just in like my toiletries for staying at the hotel. I take it everywhere because you never know when you're gonna need to redo something. I don't know. If you've I kind of hate wearing eyeliner, but sometimes I'll wear it. And so if you rub your eyes, you can smudge your eyeliner. I keep toothbrush and toothpaste. Sometimes I drink too much. No, not sometimes. I always drink too much coffee at conferences because I have a really hard time sitting still for that long and not being super sleepy. Um, so yeah, I bring nail clippers, all my makeup, everything that you need to just feel like your best self. Oh, another thing that I always keep in my book bag. In fact, I think I have it over here. Let me make sure. It might actually be in my car right now. Um, but absolutely one of the things that should be in that bag, that should be in the makeup bag, is the teeny tiny mini deodorant. When I'm nervous, I get sweaty. And so having a little tiny deodorant with me is an absolute must, so that I can get refreshed in the middle of the day, even if so sometimes what happens is you'll stay at a hotel that's maybe a 10 to 15-minute walk to the conference center. And so you really don't want to have to go back to the hotel room to refresh in the middle of the day. So you want to have a nice small bag that has everything that you need so that you can refresh whenever you feel you need to. Okay, so that's my makeup bag. Other things. Don't know about you, but I am a complete klutz when it comes to drinking coffee. Like I said, I drink way too much coffee, which is not really what I'm going to address right now. I'm actually going to address being able to drink more coffee. What happens is they have the little tiny paper cups at conferences. So sometimes they'll have the coffee station, but they're always paper cups, and I always drop them. I always drop them or I spill them on myself or both. So what I have decided to do is I always bring a travel mug. You can tell this one is well worn. It's been through the dishwasher way too many times. But this helps me to be a little bit less klutzy. It's a really good one that doesn't spill when it goes upside down, so you don't have to worry about it being in like the side pocket of your book bag. Even if you turn or bend down to grab something, it's not going to spill. And that's really important to me because, like I said, I want to be looking my best and I don't want to have coffee stains everywhere. And I have done that one too many times. So I always bring my own travel mug with me so that I can not be a klutz with my coffee. Let's see. This is more of a keeping organized for your reimbursements type tip. I used to just keep a paper envelope in my book bag, and that is totally fine. Paper envelope works great. This was just a little pouch I found at the dollar store, and I wrote receipts on it. It actually has Crayola, but I like it because it's really brightly colored, and I'm less likely to lose it. But what I do is I keep this in my book bag, and anytime I buy any sort of food, I always put my receipts directly into this bag so that they're all in the same spot. They're not jumbled up with all my credit cards and my wallet. I say that as if I have a ton of credit cards. It's like a library card and my insurance card. Regardless, having a dedicated spot for receipts is like so much easier when it comes time to do your expense reports. So having a receipts pouch, bag, envelope, whatever works, as long as it has a very special spot in your book bag. It's visible, it's easy to get to, so that whenever you buy something, you can just go ahead and get it stowed away. All right, the last thing that I do, and this is for my own sanity, mostly because I'm weird and I really love like new pens. I make sure that when I go to conferences, I have a method to take notes. That's kind of obvious, right? You're going to take notes on the research that's going on. Although I also love to try to be creative at conferences and come up with new ideas related to what I'm hearing about and things that I'm currently interested in. But I love office supplies for some reason. It's a weird like obsession of mine. So I tend to spoil myself before I go to conferences and just make sure I have some really nice pens to take notes. So sometimes I'll doodle if I'm really bored, or sometimes I'll just ideate and write notes and just throw out thoughts and get them in my notebook so that I can go back to them later. Or I'll write down poster numbers so that I can look them up later, or talk titles so that I can go find the paper associated with them after the fact. Um, and that makes my life a little bit easier. So I can sit down in that room. If I need to sit there for 3 hours, I can at least have something to do with my hands while I'm drinking my coffee, listening to the talk and doodling. I tend to like to do a lot of things at the same time. I'm definitely a multitasker, or maybe it's ADHD. I don't know. But regardless, I like my pens. So that's a must-have for me at conferences. Okay, I think that's about all of my tips for now. I'll probably come up with some new ones in this next upcoming conference season, but if you have any fun tips about conferences, do let me know. You can comment them in the video comments or send me an email, whatever it is. Let's help ladies survive these conferences because man, are they grueling, but they're a lot of fun. All right. I hope you have a great conference season. Enjoy the summer and keep an eye out for more videos. Bye.